Om Bhurabhuvah Svah Tatsaviturbharenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yo Naha Prachodayat. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Namaste, my dear friends. I am going to present this video on the Atma. In Hinduism, importance of Atma is described, explained in detail in our scriptures like Vedas, Darshan Shastras, Upanishads, Puranas, and various other important scriptures. Atma is a Sanskrit word that means inner self, spirit or soul. In Hindu philosophy, especially in the Vedanta school of Hinduism, Atma is the first principle, the true self of an individual beyond identification with phenomena. The essence of an individual. In order to attain moksha, liberation, a human being must acquire self-knowledge, Atma-gyan. For the different schools of thought, self-realization is that one's true self, Jivatma, and the ultimate reality, Brahma, are completely identical. Advaita, non-dualist, completely different Dvaita, dualist, or simultaneously non-different and different Bheda, Abheda, non-dualist plus dualist. The six orthodox schools of Hinduism believe that there is Atma in every living being, Jiva. There is a major point of difference with the Buddhist doctrine of Anatta, which holds that there is no soul or self. Atma is the immortal aspect of our mortal existence, the individual self which is hidden in every object of creation, including humans. It is the microcosm which represents the macrocosm in each of us, imparting to us divine qualities and possibilities and providing us with consciousness and the reason to exist and experience the pains and pleasures of earthly life. Atma is Brahma itself, the very self which descends into the elements of nature through self-projection or manifestation and participates personally in the game of self-induced illusion and pure delight. However, bound by the senses and limited by the ego bonds, duality and perceptual knowledge, we the jivas do not perceive the truth. We go out, become inward, and in the process forget who we are. It is like a person who travels to distant lands under a spell and forgets his roots, identity and homeland. When you look around, you really look in. When you are deeply involved with the world, you lose self-awareness and become immersed in the task at hand. It is how nature created your mind and body to keep you bound. The self-existent Lord pierced the senses to make them turn outward. Thus we look to the external world and see not the self within. So Atma is a Sanskrit word which means essence, breath, soul. It is derived from the Proto-Indo-European word, a root meaning breath, with Germanic cognates Dutch Adam, Old High German atom, breathe, modern German Atman to breathe and Atem respiration breath. Old English Epian, it can also be linked to the Greek word atmos, from which the word atmosphere is derived. Atma, sometimes spelled without a diacritic as Atma, in scholarly literature means real self of the individual, innermost essence and soul. Atma in Hinduism is considered as eternal, imperishable, beyond time, and not the same as body or mind or consciousness, but something beyond which permeates all these. In Advaita Vedanta, it is pure, undifferentiated, self-shining consciousness, the witness consciousness which observes all phenomena yet is not touched by it. Atma is a metaphysical and spiritual concept for Hindus, often discussed in their scriptures with the concept of Brahma. The self is the silent partner in all our deeds and experiences, the observer and the indweller of all embodied beings. Its nature cannot be adequately explained or described in human language, as it is beyond the senses and the mind. There the eyes cannot travel, nor speech, nor mind, nor do we know how to explain it to the disciples. It is other than the known and beyond the unknown. It can only be experienced when all the sensory activities ceases to have an impact on the mind. When the mind itself is freed from the movement of thoughts and sense objects, and the torment of desires which are the prime cause of all human activity and suffering, and subsides into quietude. The experience of the self arises when the mind and the five senses are stilled and when the intellect is stilled. They say that yoga is complete stillness in which one enters that state of oneness. How Vedas describe Atma. The earliest use of the word Atma in Indian text is found in the Rig Veda RVX.97.11. Yaska, the ancient Indian grammarian, commenting on this Rig Veda verse, accepts the following meanings of Atma: the pervading principle, the organism in which other elements are united, and the ultimate sentient principle. Other hymens of Rig Veda where the word Atma appears, there are many. Upanishads, how Upanishads describe the conception of Atma. Atma is a central idea in all the Upanishads, and know your Atma is their thematic focus. These texts state that the core of every person's self is not the body, nor the mind, nor the ego, but Atma, which means soul or self. Atma is the spiritual essence in all creatures. The real innermost essence being, it is eternal, it is the essence, it is the rangeless. Atma is the deepest level of one's existence. How Brihadaranyaka Upanishad describe Atma. The Brihadaranyaka Upanishad describes Atma as that in which everything exists, which is of the highest value, which permeates everything, which is the essence of all bliss and beyond description. In Hyman 4.4.5, Brihadaranyaka Upanishad describes Atma as Brahma and associates it with everything one is, everything one can be, one's free will, one's desire, and what one does, what one doesn't do, the good The good in oneself, the bad in oneself. The Atma, self-soul, is indeed Brahma. It, Atman, is also identified with the intellect, the manas, mind, and the vital breath, with the eyes and ears, with earth, water, air, and akasa, with fire and with what is other than fire, with desire and absence of desire, with anger and the absence of anger, with righteousness and unrighteousness, with everything. It is identified, as is well known, with this what is perceived, and with that what is inferred, as it Atma does and acts. So it becomes, by doing good it becomes good, and by doing evil it becomes evil. It becomes virtuous through good acts and vicious through evil acts. Others, however, say this self is identified with the desire alone. What it desires, so it resolves. What it resolves, so it is deed, and what deed it does, so it reaps. Brihadaranyaka Upanishad 4.5 9th century BCE. Although it is described as a flame of the size of thumb, which is said to exist physically between the eyebrows or psychically in the heart, its exact location is uncertain. It has no physical or mental aspect as such, other than as a mere reflection or an idea in the intelligence of the mind. However, unquestionably he exists, and he only is real. All is false or an illusion which withers away, crushed by the weight of sins, decay of the world, and pressures of time. We are told the adorable one is seated in the heart and rules the breath of life. All the senses pay homage to him. When he breaks out of the body in freedom from the bonds of flesh, what else remains? This self is supreme. We are also told above the senses, in the mind, above the mind, the intellect, above that is ego, and above the ego is the unmanifested cause, and beyond is Brahma, who is omnipresent and without attributes. The ego is Atman's poor cousin, the false center which assumes the lordship and ownership of the mind and body, whereas in actual reality it is a mere reflection, a product of illusion and a mental projection, born out of sensory experiences and the accumulation of memories and thoughts, while the basis of Atma is reality, permanence and bliss. The nature of ego is illusion, impermanence and suffering. The ego of a living being is permanently soaked in ignorance and gloom, and needs to be rescued from eternal doom and damnation by the indwelling Atma. The ego is a false reflection of it. The Katha Upanishad explains the relative status of the two selves in this manner. There are two selves, the separate ego and the individual Atma. When one raises above I, me and mine, the Atma reveals itself as the real self. The Mundaka Upanishad is more explicit and poetic. Like two birds perched on the same tree, intimate friends, the ego and the self dwell in the same body. The former eats the sweet and sour fruits of life, while the latter looks on with detachment. This symbolism is further expanded in the verse of Kathopanishad. So this theme of Atma, that the soul and self of every person and being is the same as Brahma, is extensively repeated in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. The Upanishad asserts that this knowledge of I am Brahma, and that there is no difference between I and you or I and him, is a source of liberation, and not even gods can prevail over such a liberated man. For example, in Hyman 1.4.10. Brahma was this before, therefore it knew even the Atma, soul himself, I am Brahma, therefore it became all, and whoever among the gods had this enlightenment also became that. It is the same with the sages, the same with man. Whoever knows the self as I am Brahma becomes all this universe. Even the gods cannot prevail against him, for he becomes their Atma. Now, if a man worships another god thinking he is one and I am another, he does not know he is like an animal to the gods. As many animals serve a man, so does each man serve the gods. Even if one animal is taken away, it causes anguish. How much more so when many are taken away? Therefore, it is not pleasing to the gods that man should know this. This is taken from Brihadaranyaka Upanishad 1.4.10. So this symbolism is further expanded in this verse of the Katha Upanishad. Know the self as the lord of the chariot, body as the chariot itself, buddhi as the charioteer, and mind as the reins. The senses are said to be the horses, and selfish desires are the roads by which they travel. When the self is confused with the body, the mind, and the senses, they say that he appears to enjoy pleasures and suffer from sorrow. Although Atman is located in all of us, we cannot know it or understand it adequately with our ordinary awareness. There, no eye can penetrate, no voice, no mind, nor do we know how to understand it or preach it. In the Kena Upanishad, the teacher explained the difficulty of knowing the self to the students in the following words: if you think that you know the self, you know not. And the student admits, I do not think I know the self, nor can I say I know him not. In the Katha Upanishad, Yama, the Lord of Death, explains to Nachiketa, the self cannot be known through the study of scriptures, nor through intellect, not through hearing learned discourses. It can be attained only by those whom the self chooses. He re-emphasizes the same point again elsewhere. In the Kena Upanishad, the problem is further explained and the way to reach Atma is also suggested. The ignorant one thinks that the self can be known by the intellect, but the enlightened one knows that he is beyond the duality of the knower and the known. Thus, intelligence may give you wisdom and discernment and pave the way, but it cannot give you the experience of pure self. The idea which is implied or suggested in the Upanishads is that Atma cannot be realized by ordinary consciousness. When the senses are active and when the mind is unstable and buddhi, intelligence is under the influence of desires, delusion and duality, which interfere with the process of knowing and discernment of truth and right knowledge. There cannot be an experience of Atma when there is the gulf of knowing between the knower and the known. He also knows it is as object, knows it not really. The mind and the senses stand between the two polarities of the knower and the known, or the subject and object. They prevent the being from knowing and realizing. Atma is its very self. The mind is an imperfect instrument with an inherent inability to understand and discern Atma. The truth of the self cannot come to him who has not realized that he is the self. His intelligence cannot reveal the self to him beyond its duality of subject and object. Along with Brihadaranyaka, all the earliest and middle Upanishads discuss Atma as they build their theories to answer how man can achieve liberation, freedom and bliss. The Katha Upanishad, for example, explains Atma as the immanent and transcendent innermost essence of each human being and living creature. That this is one even though the external forms of living creatures manifest in different forms. For example, Hyman 20209 states, as the one fire after it has entered the world, though one takes different forms according to whenever it burns, so does the internal Atma of all living beings, though one takes a form according to whatever he enters and is outside all from Katha Upanishad 20209. So, how does one realize Atma? What is the solution or the process by which Atma becomes self-evident? The Upanishads are clear. The self cannot be known by a person who does not restrain himself from unrighteousness ways, who does not control his senses and still his mind, and who does not practice meditation or austerity. Explains Yama to Nachiketa in the Katha Upanishad. He also adds, this awakening which you have known comes not through logic and scholarship, but from close association with a realized Guru. However, mere association with a spiritual master in the form of a spiritual Guru may not be very helpful unless there is an inner and deep commitment and aspiration to know the transcendental self. The self cannot be known through the study of the scriptures, nor through intellect, nor through learned discourses. The self can be attained by only those who the self chooses. Verily to them does the self reveals. Establishing the connection between the outer and the inner worlds is neither easy nor direct and straightforward. One has to pass through many intermediate states and stages, overcome many obstacles, remove many impurities, silence many noises of the mind and the body, suppress undesirable qualities and negative tendencies to reach the final goal. In the mortal world, the self is subject to the illusion of states. However, what can be said about the ultimate experience of knowing the self? What happens when a seeker reaches there? No one seems to know clearly or describe adequately what happens when a seeker achieves union with the self or Brahma. From the experience of others, we understand that the state of self-realization is beyond the faculties of the human mind and cannot adequately be translated into any human language, since words which belong to the domain of the conditioned mind do not carry the intensity or the luminosity of transcendental truths. At the same time, we know that there is a palpable secret somewhere in the recesses of our own consciousness. We know it is there because in profound moment we can feel its presence. We know we are different when we are silent and deeply contemplative. Even with all the distractions which the world offers, the delight of the self cannot be contained forever. Secret caves of the heart. So, Katha Upanishad in Book 1, Hymans 303 to 304 describes the widely cited analogy of chariot for the relation of soul, self to body, mind and senses. Stephen Kaplan translates these hymns as know the self as the rider in a chariot and the body as simply the chariot. Know the intellect as the charioteer and the mind as the reins. The senses, they are the horses, and senses objects are the paths around them. The Katha Upanishad then declared that when the Atma understands this and is unified, integrated with body, senses, mind, is virtuous, mindful and pure, he reaches bliss, freedom and liberation. Chandogya Upanishad. The Chandogya Upanishad explains Atma as that which appears to be separate between two living beings, but is not that essence and innermost truth, radiant self of all individuals, which connects and unifies all. Hyman 6.10 explains it with example of rivers, some of which flow to the east and some to the west, but ultimately all merges into the ocean and becomes one. In the same way, the individual souls are pure beings, states the Chandogya Upanishad. An individual soul is pure truth, and an individual soul is a manifestation of the ocean of universal soul. In the expansive states of the mind, in sublime states and profound moments, when you feel connected to the world or nature, and in moments of great vulnerability, when you feel lost or helpless, the joy and the love of the soul gushes forth into your wakeful mind with the thundering sounds of a wild river, and wake up to the truth of self. Thus the self, who is eternal witness, does not entirely forsake you. If you manage to express the best of human nature, if you have compassion, love, tolerance and equanimity, and if you overcome the demons of your own mind, you will increasingly feel connected to him and see the world with his eyes. In the journey of knowing the self, you may also need the grace of God. In the Isa Upanishad, we come across a vague reference to it when a seeker prays to Brahma in the following words, suggesting the importance devotion. The face of truth is hidden behind a golden lid. O Pushan, may you remove the lid so that I may see the golden truth. When the request is granted and the truth which he was seeking manifests itself, he reaches the indisputable conclusion in a state of bliss and explains, in truth I am him. The self is the ultimate mystery of human life. To know it is the ultimate goal which is a person may be destined to achieve after numerous births by earning great merit. In him the cycle of creation reaches its full circle when he discovers the truth that remains hidden behind the golden lid. And other Upanishads. Atma is a key topic of the Upanishads, but they express two distinct, somewhat divergent themes. Some teach that Brahma, highest reality, universal principle being consciousness, bliss, is identical with Atma, while others teach that Atma is part of Brahma but not identical to it. This ancient debate flowered into various dual and non-dual theories in Hinduism. The Brahma Sutra by Badrayana 100 BCE synthesized and unified these somewhat conflicting theories, stating that Atma and Brahma are different in some respects, particularly during the state of ignorance, but at the deepest level and in the state of self-realization, Atma and Brahma are identical, not different. This synthesis overcame the dualistic tradition of Sankhya Yoga schools and realism-driven tradition of Nyaya Vaisesika school, enabling it to become the foundation of Vedanta as Hinduism's enduring spiritual tradition. Schools of thought. All major orthodox schools of Hinduism, Nyaya, Vaisesika, Sankhya, Yoga, Mimamsa and Vedanta accept the foundational premise of the Vedas and Upanishads that Atma exists. Jainism too accepts this premise, although it has its own idea of what that means. It contrasts both Buddhism and the Charvakas deny that there is anything called Atma. Knowing Atma, also referred to as self-knowledge, is one of the defining themes of all major orthodox schools of Hinduism, but they diverge on how. In Hinduism, self-knowledge is the knowledge and understanding of Atma, what it is and what it is not. Hinduism considers Atma as distinct from the ever-evolving individual personality characterized with ahankara, ego, non-spiritual, psychological I-ness, me-ness, habits, prejudices, desires, impulses, delusions, fads, behaviors, pleasures, springs, and fears. Human personality and ahankara shift, evolve, or change with time, state the schools of Hinduism, while Atma doesn't. Atma, state these schools, is the unchanging, eternal, innermost, radiant self that is unaffected by personality, unaffected by ego of oneself, unaffected by ego of others. Atma is that which is ever free, never bound, one that seeks, realizes, and is realized purpose, meaning liberation in life. Puchalski states the ultimate goal of Hindu religious life is to transcend individuality, to realize one's own true nature, the inner essence of oneself, which is divine and pure. Now, Vedanta school. Philosophical schools such as Advaita, non-dualism, see the spirit, soul, self within each living entity as being fully identical with Brahma. The Advaita school believes that there is one soul that connects and exists in all living beings, regardless of their shapes or forms. And there is no distinction, no superior, no inferior, no separate devotee soul, Atma, no separate God soul, Brahma. The oneness unifies all beings. There is divine in every being, and that all existence is a single reality, state the Advaita Vedanta Hindus. In contrast, devotional sub-schools of Vedanta such as Dvaita dualism differentiate between the individual Atma in living beings and the Supreme Atma, Paramatma, as being separated. Advaita Vedanta philosophy considers Atma as self-existent awareness, limitless and non-dual. To Advaitins, the Atma is the Brahma is the Atma. Each self is non-different from the infinity. Atma is the universal principle, one eternal, undifferentiated, self-luminous consciousness. The truth, asserts Advaita Hinduism, human beings in a state of unawareness of this universal self see their I-ness as different from the being in others, then act out of impulse, fears, cravings, malice, division, confusion, anxiety, passions, and a sense of distinctiveness. To Advaitins, Atma knowledge is the state of full awareness, liberation, and freedom that overcomes dualities at all levels, realizing the divine within oneself, the divine in others, and in all living beings, the non-dual oneness that God is in everything and everything is God. This identification of individual living beings, souls or Jeev Atmas with the one Atma is the non-dualistic Advaita Vedanta position. The monist non-dual conception of existence in Advaita Vedanta is not accepted by the dualistic theistic Dvaita Vedanta. Dvaita Vedanta calls the Atma of a supreme being as Paramatma and holds it to be different from individual Atma. Dvaita scholars asserts that God is the ultimate, complete, perfect but distinct soul, one that is separate from incomplete, imperfect jivas, individual souls. The Advaita sub-school believes that self-knowledge leads to liberation in this life, while the Dvaita sub-school believes that liberation is only possible in afterlife as communion with God and only through the grace of God. If not, then one's Atma is reborn. God created individual souls, state Dvaita Vedantis, but the individual soul never was and never will become one with God. The best it can do is to experience bliss by getting infinitely close to God. The Dvaita school, therefore, in contrast to the monistic position of Advaita, advocates a version of monotheism wherein Brahma is made synonymous with Vishnu or Narayana, distinct from numerous individual Atmans. The Advaita school states Graham OP is not strict monotheism, as it does not deny existence of other gods and their respective Atma. In the Akshar Purushottam Darshan school of Vedanta, the Atma referred to as the Jiva is defined as a distinct individual soul that is a finite sentient being. Jivas are bound by Maya, which hides their true self, which is characterized by eternal existence, consciousness and bliss. There are an infinite number of Jivas. They are extremely subtle, indivisible, imperishable, ageless and immortal while residing within the heart. A jiva pervades the entire body by its capacity to know, Grahan Shakti, making it animate. It is the form of knowledge, Gyan Sabrup, as well as the knower, Gyan Gyata. The Jeev is the performer of virtuous and immoral actions, karmas and experience the fruits of these actions. It has been eternally bound by Maya. As a result, it roams within the cycle of birth and death. Birth is when a jiva acquires a new body, and death is when it departs from the body. Just as one abandons one's old clothes and wears new ones, the jiva renounces its old body and acquires a new one. Mimamsa school. Atma in the ritualism-based Mimamsa school of Hinduism is an eternal, omnipresent, inherently active essence that is identified as I consciousness. Unlike all other schools of Hinduism, Mimamsa scholars considered ego and Atma as the same. Within Mimamsa school, there was a divergence of beliefs. Kumarila, for example, believed that Atma is the object of I consciousness, whereas Prabhakara believed that Atma is the subject of I consciousness. Mimamsa Hindus believed that what matters is virtuous actions and rituals completed with perfection, and it is this that creates merits and imprints knowledge on Atma, whether one is aware or not aware of Atma. Therefore, most emphasis was formulation and understanding of laws, duties, virtuous life, dharma, and consequent perfect execution of Kriya's actions. The Upanishadic discussion of Atma to them was of secondary importance, while other schools disagreed and discarded the Atma theory of Mimamsa. They incorporated Mimamsa theories on ethics, self-discipline, action and dharma as necessary in one's journey towards knowing the one's Atma. Vaiseshika school. The Vaiseshika school of Hinduism, using its non-theistic theories of atomistic naturalism, posits that Atma is one of the four eternal non-physical substances without attributes, the other three being Kala, time, Dik, space, and Manas, mind. Time and space stated Vaiseshika scholars are Eka, one, Nitya, eternal, and Vibhu, all pervading. Time and space are indivisible, indivisible reality, but human mind prefers to divide them to comprehend past, present, future, relative place of other substances and beings, direction, and its own coordinates in the universe. In contrast to these characteristics of time and space, Vaiseshika scholars considered Atma to be many, eternal, independent, and spiritual substances that cannot be reduced or inferred from other three non-physical and five physical dravya substances. Mind and sensory organs are instruments, while consciousness is the domain of Atma, soul, self. The knowledge of Atma to Vaiseshika Hindus is the another knowledge without any bliss or consciousness. Moksha states that Vedanta and Yoga school describe Nyaya school. Early atheistic Nyaya scholars and later theistic Nyaya scholars both made substantial contributions to the systematic study of Atma. They posited that even though self, soul is intimately related to the knower, it can still be the subject of knowledge. Johann Plot states that the Nyaya scholars developed a theory of negation that far exceeds Hegel's theory of negation, while their epistemological theories refined to know the knower at least equals Aristotle's sophistication. Nyaya methodology influenced all major schools of Hinduism. Nyaya scholars defined Atma as an imperceptible substance that is the substrate of human consciousness, manifesting itself with or without qualities such as desires, feeling, perception, knowledge, understanding, errors, insight, suffering, bliss, and others. Nyaya school not only developed its theory of Atma, it contributed to Hindu philosophy in a number of ways. To the Hindu theory of Atma, the contribution of Nyaya scholars were twofold. One, they went beyond holding it as self-evident and offered rational proofs consistent with their epistemology in their debates with Buddhists that Atma exists. Second, they developed theories on what Atma is and is not. As proofs for their propositions, self, soul exist. For example, Nyaya scholars argued that personal recollections and memories of the form "I did this so many years ago" implicitly presume that there is a self that is substantial, continuing, unchanged, and existent. Nyaya Sutra, a 2nd century CE foundational text of Nyaya school of Hinduism, states that the soul is a proper object of human knowledge. It also states that soul is a real substance that can be inferred from certain signs, objectively perceivable attributes. For example, in Book 1, Chapter 1, verses 9 and 10, Nyaya Sutra states, Atma, body, senses, objects of senses, intellect, mind, activity, error, prita bhava, afterlife, fruit, suffering, and bliss are the objects of right knowledge. Desire, aversion, effort, happiness, suffering, and cognition are the linga, mark, sign of the Atma. Book 2, Chapter 1, verses 1 to 23 of the Nyaya Sutras posits that the sensory acts of looking is different from perception and cognition, that perception and knowledge arises from the seeking and actions of Atma. The Nyayikas emphasize that the Atma has qualities but is different from its qualities. For example, desire is of one many qualities of the Atma, but the Atma does not always have desire. And in the state of liberation, for instance, the Atma is without desire. Sankhya school. The concept of Atma in Sankhya, the oldest school of Hinduism, is quite similar to one in Advaita Vedanta school. Both Sankhya and Advaita consider the ego, asmita, ahankara, rather than the Atma to be the cause of pleasure and pain. They both consider Atma as self, soul, that is innermost essence of any individual being. Further, they both consider self-knowledge as the means of liberation, freedom and bliss. The difference between Sankhya and Advaita is the Sankhya holds there are as many Atma as there are beings, each distinct reality unto itself, and self-knowledge as a state of icity. In contrast, the monism theme of Advaita holds that there is one soul and that the self of all beings are connected and unified with Brahma. The essence and spirit of everything is related to each self, asserts Advaita Vedanta, and each Atma is related to the essence and spirit of everything. All is one, self is Brahma, and Brahma is self. Sankhya asserts that each being Atma is unique and different. Yoga school. The Yoga Sutra of Patanjali, the foundational text of Yoga school of Hinduism, mentions Atma in multiple verses, and particularly in its last book where Samadhi is described as the path to self-knowledge and Kaivalya. Some earlier mentions of Atma in Yoga Sutra includes verse 2, Note 5, where evidence of ignorance includes confusing but is not Atma. Avidya is regarded the transient as eternal, the impure as pure, the pain-giving as joy-giving, and the non-Atman as Atma. Anitya Shuchi Dukhanatmasu Nitya Shuchi Sukhatam Mukhya Tirvidya. In verse 2, note 19 to 2 note 20, Yoga Sutra declared that pure ideas are the domain of the soul. The perceivable universe exists to enlighten the soul, but while soul is pure, it may be deceived by complexities of perception or its intellect. These verses also set the purpose of all experience as a means to self-knowledge. The seer soul is the absolute knower. Though pure, modifications are witnessed by him by coloring of intellect. The spectacle exists only to serve the purpose of Atma. The book 4 Yoga Sutra states spiritual liberation as the stage where the yogin achieves distinguishing self-knowledge. He no longer confuses his mind as his soul. The mind is no longer affected by affections or worries of any kind. Ignorance vanishes and pure consciousness settles in its own pure nature. The Yoga school is similar to the Sankhya school in its conceptual foundation of Atma. It is the self that is discovered and realized in the Kaivalya state in both schools. Like Sankhya, this is not a single universal Atma. It is one of many individual selves where each pure consciousness settles in its own pure state as a unique, distinct soul self. However, Yoga school's methodology was widely influential over other schools of Hindu philosophy. Vedanta Monism, for example, adopted yoga as a means to reach Jivan Mukti, self-realization in this life, as conceptualized in Advaita Vedanta. Influence of Atma theory on Hindu ethics. The Atma theory in Upanishads had a profound impact on ancient ethical theories and dharma traditions now known as Hinduism. The earliest Dharma Sutras of Hindu recite Atma theory from the Vedic text and Upanishads, and on its foundation build precepts of dharma, laws and ethics. Atma theory, particularly the Advaita Vedanta and Yoga versions, influenced the emergence of the theory of ahimsa, non-violence against all creatures, culture of vegetarianism, and other theories of ethical dharma. Dharma Sutras and Dharma Shastras integrate the teachings of Atma theory. Apastamba Dharma Sutra, the oldest known Indian text on Dharma, for example, titles chapter 1.8.22 and 1.8 2.3 as a knowledge of the Atma, and then recites, there is no higher object than the attainment of the knowledge of Atma. We shall quote the verses from the Veda which refer to the attainment of the knowledge of Atma. All living creatures are the dwelling of Him who lies enveloped in matter, who is immortal, who is spotless. A wise man shall strive after the knowledge of the Atma. It is He, Self, who is the eternal part in all creatures, whose essence is wisdom, who is immortal, unchangeable, pure. He is the universe, He is the highest goal. Freedom from anger, from excitement, from rage, from greed, from perplexity, from hypocrisy, from hurtfulness, from injury to others, speaking the truth, moderate eating, refraining from calumny and envy, sharing with others, avoiding accepting gifts, uprightness, forgiveness, gentleness, tranquility, temperance, amity with all living creatures, yoga, honorable conduct, benevolence, and contentedness. These virtues have been agreed upon by all the ashramas. He who, according to the precepts of the sacred law, practice these becomes united with the universal self. Knowledge of the Atma, apastamba dharmastuta. Ahimsa. The ethical prohibition against harming any human beings or other living creatures, ahimsa, in Hindu traditions can be traced to the Atma theory. This precept against injuring any living being appeared together with Atma theory in Hyman 8.1 to 15.1 of Chandogya Upanishad, 8th century BCE. Then becomes central in the text of Hindu philosophy, entering the Dharma codes of ancient Dharma sutras and later era Manusmriti. Ahimsa theory is a natural corollary and consequence of Atma is universal oneself, present in all living beings. Atma connects and pervades in everyone. Hurting or injuring another being is hurting the Atma and thus one's self that exists in another body. This conceptual connection between one's Atma, the universal, and ahimsa starts in Isha Upanishad, dwells in the theories of the ancient scholar Yagnavalkya, and one which inspired Gandhi and led non-violent movement against colonialism in early 20th century. Now, one shloka in Upanishad translation says, and he who sees everything in his Atma and is Atma in everything does not seek to hide himself from that, in whom all beings have become one with his own Atma. What perplexity, what sorrow is there when he sees this oneness? He, the self, pervades all, resplendent, bodiless, woundless, without muscles, pure, untouched by evil, far-seeing, transcendent, self-being, disposing ends through perpetual ages. Atma, the difference between Hinduism and Buddhism. See, Buddhism does not believe in the conception of Atma at all. So, let's not bother about much. Atma Gyan and know thyself. The Atma concept and its discussions in Hindu philosophy parallel with the soul and its discussion in ancient Greek philosophy. Eliade notes that there is a capital difference with schools of Hinduism asserting that liberation of Atma implies self-knowledge and bliss. Similarly, the self-knowledge conceptual theme of Hinduism, Atma Jnana, parallels the know thyself conceptual theme of Greek philosophy. Max Muller summarized it thus: there is not what could be called a philosophical system in these Upanishads. They are, in the true sense of the word, gases at truth, frequently contradicting each other, yet all tending in one direction. The keynotes of the old Upanishads is know thyself, but with a much deeper meaning than that of the Delphic oracle. The know thyself of the Upanishads means know thy true self, that which underlies thine ego, and find it and know it in the highest, the eternal self, the one without a second, which underlies the world. So, dear friends, this was all about the conception of Atmas in the Hindu scriptures. Dear, I will just give the briefing what we have listened so far. See, Atma is the only living entity in our body. Atma has a feature, a quality that it creates thoughts. These thoughts arise from the Atma in continuity and constitute our mind. Then mind has various modifications, that is, ego, intellect, and so on. Now, when the mind is going away from the Atma towards outside, it is having negative energy. It is having negative energy. And the same mind, when diverted to move towards the spiritual heart, that is Atma, it is having positive energy and it is in the pure form. So that becomes the part of Atma. So ego and Atma, in reality, they are having their source in the spiritual heart, in the Atma. So they are part and parcel of Atma only. But only the difference comes when mind and ego, they are having the tendency to move outward, so then they are away from divinity. So they are having negative energy. So they are completely becomes ignorant of the Atma. But when a sadhaka diverts his ego and mind during meditation to move towards the Atma, this mind and ego moving towards the Atma are in the pure form and they become the part of the Atma. If a sadhaka practices regularly and uses the affirmation like this, that I am going slowly and steadily inwardly to the spiritual heart, enters the spiritual heart and merges with the Atma. So this practice will weaken the mind and ego and also destroy the vasanas. When the mind, ego and vasanas are destroyed, that means they become part of Atma. That is the self-knowledge. Because after the destruction of mind, ego and vasanas, what is left? Atma. So this is the state of realization. And this is the state of realization which leads to the liberation. So, in the body, when the body is existing, Atma is realized, the sadhaka is known as a Jivan Mukta. That means he is liberated while in the living body, while his Atma is embodied in the living body. So, dear friends, I will give more and more video on these topics because they are the real requirement of sadhakas. So, thank you, my dear friends, for listening this wonderful video. Please like, comment and share the video and subscribe the channel. Thank you. Dear friend, this is your own channel. This is for the benefit of all my dear friends. Thanks a lot. Namaskar. Namaskar. Namaskar.